So I listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books, and in many ways it's for the same reason most of us do. I mean, some of it's entertainment, but some of it is we're looking to learn. We're looking for knowledge, wisdom, advice, guidance to make better decisions, ultimately, right? So some of the podcasts, right? Sometimes I'll listen to finance podcasts where they give advice about, how you should be thinking about retirement savings and tax savings and all these different things, right? And they're giving advice of how to approach it. And they're good podcasts, right? Obviously, I listen to a bunch of podcasts that are around some degree of self-improvement and how to better yourself and how to think more clearly. I just listened to one today where they were talking about how to use meditation as a way to kind of be successful, and you can kind of use it to achieve your goals, whether they be professional, and kind of get yourself in the right mindset so that you can achieve the things you want to achieve. And somebody was giving an example of how they became, an executive vice president of a tech company at a young age through some of these techniques, and all different stuff, some around parenting, all different things. But as I often do, I find myself grappling with all of it a bit, because whether it be a gift or a curse or whatever you would call it, I always want to trace things back to the root. I want to understand, okay, in what we're talking about, if this advice is good advice for me, why is it good advice? Like, let me follow that thread to say, okay, if I take this advice and I do this, then I'll have more financial security, right? Let's stick with that example. It's a financial advisor who's giving their advice on how to think about IRAs and 401ks and how to increase your financial security so that you're better set for retirement or whatever. And I think about that, and you could stop, right? You could stop what I would argue partway through the thread and say, yeah, all right, I listened to this advice and I'm going to know, how to optimize my 401k and kind of use that with a health savings account or whatever. And cool, that's the exact objective I wanted. I wanted to know how to be more financially secure. But what if you keep pushing? What if you say, okay, but why do I want to be more financially secure? What does that get me? What does that look like? Like, what's that working towards? Why is that important, right? And you can do that on all the different topics. What always happens is you get to the end of the thread, which gets to what's the meaning of life. Now, I personally really enjoy talking about that, and I think it's super interesting. And my impression is some people do as well, but some people are turned off by that. Some people think, like, as soon as you get to that, like, meaning of life question, like, put that away. Like, let's be practical here. Let's be pragmatic. That conversation doesn't have any base or business in this financial security discussion, right? Just listen to the podcast, put money in your 401k and be done with it. But I gotta be honest, I can't think of anything more practical or pragmatic than figuring out the answer to that question. What's the meaning of life? So much so that I would venture to say that all the advice I've ever heard or been given, or any of us have ever heard or been given, I wouldn't say it's useless, but it's extremely limited in its value if we don't have the answer to that meaning of life question. And I've talked about Tolstoy before, and he's kind of articulated this, right? If I don't know why I'm here or who I am, then life's impossible. It's very much in that vein, but I'm not saying that in a poetic, abstract, philosophical way. I'm saying that in a very logical, direct, pragmatic way. I need to know what I'm trying to accomplish in life so that I can know if having more financial security or more money in my 401k for retirement is actually important to me. I need to know the meaning of life so that I know if I'm trying to use meditation so that I can overcome some things and become more disciplined and achieve things in my career, that actually matters and that I give a shit about that. And this seemingly abstract, theoretical, philosophical idea of like, well, what am I here to do? What's the meaning of all this? That becomes critical. It's not something we could just be like, oh yeah, maybe on the weekends when we're having a couple of drinks, we can kind of kick that around and just, that's the time for that. I don't understand that. I genuinely don't. Because to me, it's at the base, it's at the root, it's fundamental to everything we do. And I'm as guilty of this as anybody, but we spend so much time consuming advice and guidance and self-help and tips and, right, 7 tips to this and that, all these different things, which are good. And I think they're well-intentioned. I don't think it's anybody's trying to be malicious necessarily, although I'm sure some people are. I don't think anybody's necessarily incompetent in it. It's just, for some reason, we're not willing to finish the thread and address that meaning of life question. And somebody might say, well, Terry, the reason we don't want to finish that thread and address that question is because there's no fucking answer, man. So what are we going to do? We're going to get to the end of that thread and then what? It's useless. That may be true. That may very well be true, but that doesn't change the fact of how important it is. It doesn't change the fact that the advice you're taking then, right? The guidance, the tips, the actions you're going to take, well, then they might be meaningless too. They may have no basis or merit at all if you don't know what they're rooted in. And I'm not sure where to go with that, honestly. I mean, I think it comes down to, and this is what I've learned from the 140 or so podcasts that I've done thus far, of asking people, what do you value? What matters to you? How are you making these decisions and determining what the meaning of life is for you? Is obviously you have to figure it out for yourself. I don't think there's a singular meaning, although there might be, right? Maybe the Christian religion or the Jewish religion or the Muslim religion or whatever it is. Maybe they have it right. Maybe that's what it is. But I think you have to figure it out for you, obviously, of what matters to you. And I don't think that's the novel or important piece. I think all of us would know that. Oh, you have to figure out your own meaning. Great. Thanks, Terry. Great tip. What I think is insightful in that, or important to understand in that, is the acceptance and the acknowledgement of what that is, right? And I mean that on both sides. There's an acceptance of, hey, I've declared this or said to myself, this is what's important to me. This is the meaning of my life. This is what I value. Therefore, these tips, this advice, I can say with some confidence that it's going to directly correlate to me achieving those things. So that's why I'm seeking out that advice. I've finished that thread and I could see the connection points to it. But also, on the flip side of that, some acknowledgement that it's all very subjective. It's all very subjective. It's what I've decided is the meaning of my life. I don't know what it is for sure. So I've picked something. Practically, I've just picked something and now I'm acting in accordance with it. But if somebody else sees it different, if somebody else subjectively picked some other meaning for their life, well, then their guidance, their input, their advice, the way they're going to approach things is going to be completely different. And almost logically, that has to be okay, because we don't know what the meaning of life is. So either it's all meaningless and none of the advice and tips are useful at all. It just helps us pass the day and sleep at night that we feel like, oh, I'm taking some action to improve my financial security. But when you ask, well, why are you doing that? I don't, ultimately, I have no idea. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I would do that. I'm not sure. Right? So like, there's that piece of it, but there's that acknowledgement that I had to pick something, but I know I'm never going to be that committed to. I'm never going to feel like this is something divine that's been handed down to me. If anybody disagrees with this, if anybody sees it differently, well, now we have this, fundamental issue and difference. Like, no, we're all just picking. We're all just guessing, ultimately. We have different ways and means of doing that. I've talked about it in other videos of how we figure out what our meaning is, right? But at the end of the day, it's all we're doing. We're all just guessing and doing our best to pick something that we think is meaningful for us, and we're trying to act in accordance with it. And that's the best we can do.